Why did you get fired? A business I went to long ago was hiring and I got the job. Right after I signed all the paperwork, the department manager comes in and asks who I am. I tell him I was just hired as a temp. Manger says he never authorized any hiring and fired both me and my boss on the spot. I did not work for this company at all and they fired me. Well, I'm sorry, there's just no way that we could keep you on. I don't even really work here. That's what makes this so difficult. I had a similar experience. I was interviewing for a sales position and I made it all the way up the ladder through 3 different managers to the advertising director. Had a great interview. He told me I would be the future of this industry, shook my hand, led me to the HR manager's office, clapped me on the back and said to her, "We're hiring him. Start the paperwork and I'll see you Monday." She was pregnant, tired, and annoyed. She looked at me with disgust and said, "We eliminated that position yesterday. We're not hiring anyone." I asked if the director or managers knew that. She said they should. What followed was an embarrassing 2 weeks of promises that they would make a spot for me and weak apologies from the hiring managers. Oof. Hired and fired within seconds. They did you a favor. Working for a company that broken and dysfunctional would be a nightmare. Lols, this happened to me once too. I was in a mass supply moment and one fast casual counter service restaurant was doing a mass hiring. They sent me all their hired emails and gave me the location for the first day orientation. I show up and they bring me and like 5 other people back out in the hallway and told us we were cut and no reason was given. We were all sitting in the same row too, so there was just too many people called and apparently we talked amongst ourselves and assumed that haha. I fired that row since I don't want to work with unlucky people. And then companies wonder why people don't want to waste their time with those kinds of runarounds. No one wants to work. No. People are sick of your shit and tired of you wasting their time. Treat people with respect and people will want to work for you. I was denied a raise by HR after consistently working 60 to 70 hours weeks, and my VP, who had supported and requested the raise for me, told me to stop putting in the extra time, work my 40, and spend that extra time applying to new jobs. Within a month, a meeting was called to mutually part ways because my work wasn't getting done. I was gratified to learn that they had to hire 2 people to do my job after I left. Edit, sucks to see how much this resonates with people who have been in a similar situation. I left this job back in 2015, thankfully. The VP is no longer there either, and good for him. Bet that felt good knowing they had to pay 2 people for what you did all by yourself. Glad you got out of there though. Maybe this is just the millennial in me, but if I was working 70 hours a week, denied a raise, and had my position filed by 2 people, I wouldn't have felt good or gratified. I'd have been pissed. Wasted my time. Wasted my life. Wasted my potential. Refused to pay me even half of what they're now paying. That company, and everyone involved in the process of denying that raise should themselves be fired for being fuckwits. The only thing this story conjures in my mind is that scene from Futurama, where they show all the Fox executives after making a joke about canceling and bring the show back. For doing my job too quickly and sitting down the rest of the time. Gas station cashier 3rd shift. Me, why should I stand when I'm the only person in the store? Manager, it's more professional to stand than sit. Me, then why do you sit in your office? I never understood that. Not once have I walked into an establishment, seen an employee sitting, and gone wow. He's unprofessional. I literally don't give a f, as long as you do your job. Especially gas stations. If anything, they're the kind of jobs I would expect to see someone sitting. His wife thought he was having an affair with the office manager. He asked me if I thought it was possible that he was having an affair with the office manager. I said, "It's possible, but I don't think you are. I could see why your wife might think so too." I was 21 and naive as hell. Never should have said anything. He was 100% having an affair with the office manager. LOL. She knew too much. Yeah, you wouldn't ask someone that in good faith, much less a 21-year-old. This isn't why I got fired, but this is why I didn't get a job. I was 16 and looking to work at a Dairy Queen as my first job. My mom drove me to the interview and I was super nervous. She looked me in the eye and said, "Just be honest, and be yourself, and you'll do fine." I walked into that interview and when he asked me, "How long do you think you'll work here?" I responded, "Until something better comes along." LOL. Hey, honesty. I talked my way into a job at a software company when they put a hiring notice in a local paper. I had no idea what the software did. I still don't. They hired me as a trainer and no one ever explained what the product was. I did a few weeks where I was trained on the software, but literally none of it ever made sense to me. It was like they were speaking gibberish. One day I showed up, a lady I had never seen before gave me a check and walked me out to the parking lot. No one even ever said "You're fired" or anything. It's one of the strangest things that ever happened to me. That reminds me of a time that I got escorted out early from a group interview. The company was a little suspicious altogether. The interviewer was even more sus because he was just wearing all black, polo and jeans, and was absolutely decked out in gold jewelry. Looked like he stepped out of a mob movie or something. Sounds like you were interviewing for a pyramid scheme and asking questions they didn't like. I got fired once for putting in my 2-week notice. The only other time I've gotten fired was working for a trade company during the first week. I was a supervisor, and there was a second supervisor on site. I got a call that my wife had been rushed to the hospital, which was literally less than a mile away. I asked the other supervisor if I could go to attend to her, and he said, "Sure, no problem, I've got things here. Go." I returned to the job site later to find the boss there, and he let me go on the spot for leaving the team without a supervisor. He knew what had happened, and still fired me. I won't lie, that one kind of pissed me off. Happened to my wife. She was due her first commission check, but they fired on the spot when she gave notice. Literally about $100 too. A company I used to work for did that routinely. It was meant to be punitive, since it kept people from cashing out their vacation time. So employees started burning through all their vacation and giving notice immediately on their return. The managers looked surprised the first time someone did it, but didn't change their MO. Instead, they got really paranoid every time someone went away for more than a few days. My parole officer wanted to make sure I actually had a job, so he went to my employer listed on my file to surprise visit me on the job. I did home wiring, so I worked at different job sites and rarely in the office. He called me to say he was going to violate me for lying to him about my whereabouts. This could have landed me back in prison for my remaining 10.5 years sentence. The owner of the company had to speak with him and vouch for me. My parole office didn't violate me, but the owner sure did fire me that day. Finding a job with a felony isn't an easy thing, and it wasn't long before my PO threatened to violate me if I didn't find a job soon. Seems illegal for the owner to fire you just because they had to explain you were in a site. I imagine they hired you knowing you had a felony, since that's a big question on every job app. I read it like the boss fired him because he didn't disclose he was a felon, not that he was on the site. The owner was aware. He explained that he was apprehensive about hiring me in the first place, but to have these situations brought to his business was a liability he no longer wanted to bear. Stealing narcotics. I was a nurse. 6 years clean now. Lost my nursing license though. It was a difficult lesson to learn, but it may have saved my life. Finally, had to scroll this far down to find someone who actually owns up to their firing. Good for you and glad you're doing well. I was fired as well earlier this year, not for narcotics but because I'm a crap programmer and they realized it. Oh yeah, it was totally my fault. The crazy part is I was caught and basically allowed to resign and move on to the next job over and over. And I never learned from it, rather I was enabled to keep doing what I was doing. Until one place finally pressed charges. I was looking at prison time at first and ended up with 2 years probation and losing my nursing license. But I don't know. The way I was headed, it may have saved my life. I got fired for submitting my timesheets on Monday at 8 a.m. when I got into work. By policy, they were to be in by noon on Saturday, but my Fridays ended in the field, so I just did them on Monday mornings. My bosses didn't even look at them until noon on Tuesday, so it had zero impact on them. I drove home from being fired feeling relieved because of how unhappy I was at that job. Timesheets might be the worst part of most jobs. Sometimes they took me over an hour to do for the week because I would do different jobs for like 40 businesses. Then I would need to figure out what to input on my timesheet during the hour that it took me to do the timesheet to begin with. I was fired from Panera as soon as I walked in the door for my first day of work. I showed up 10 minutes early and walked in 5 minutes before my shift started. The manager met me at the door and said I was being unprofessional and threatened to call the cops when I pushed for an explanation. Turns out the employees did lots of drugs while working and were probably high out of their minds. Can confirm, let go from Panera Catering because I had a bad opiate habit. Years ago. Reading during my lunch break. I have a friend who used to work at a large retail store. Her manager would notify her when it was time for her 15-minute breaks and her lunch break every day. She kept being interrupted by that same manager or co-workers who were told to find her by that manager during her breaks, so she started taking breaks in her car. The manager got mad about it, so escalated things to the point where she was fired for leaving the property during her 15-minute breaks. I guess you are not allowed to do that. But either way, she hadn't ever actually left, she just read in her car for a while to get away from work. She didn't have money for a lawyer, but I always felt that would have been a pretty easy wrongful termination case to prove if she had. Please like and subscribe for more daily content.